Welcome to Out of the Noise podcast, a spiritual growth podcast. This podcast is about holding sacred space to help assist humanity to raise their consciousness through connection by having courageous conversations out of the noise of mainstream with heart-centered leaders, wisdom keepers, and divine humans expanding into their authenticity and soul purpose. We will explore spiritual concepts, practices, and shadow to deepen into your healing and the collective. Priestess Lily is a medium, light activator, and heart-centered leader that is committed in raising the light frequency and consciousness here on Earth for us all. You can work with her and learn more by visiting www.priestesslily.com. Enjoy your spiritual learnings.
Welcome to Out of the Noise. I'm Priestess Lily, channeler, sacred heart healer, and space holder, creating content to help us as humanity to rise the consciousness through connection by holding and having courageous conversations that will leave you activated with heart-centered leaders, wisdom keepers, and divine humans expanding into their authenticity and soul purpose. Today, we are talking to the gorgeous Maree Eddings from Byron Bay, Australia, about the patriarchy wound. This is powerful, and it really needs to be listened to. Maree Eddings is a fellow priestess, transformational leader, changemaker, energy alchemist, and creates and holds space for influential women's collective. Maree's background is she used to be an executive director in a global investment bank. And through her experience in working in this field, it has helped her unwind the conditioning we have as women when it comes to leadership and power. This conversation will leave you activating, wanting to step forward and action your desires to start living truly aligned life and lean into a new wave of your higher self. Welcome, Maree. I'm so glad that you took the invitation to come back on my podcast, because every time you come, the conversation is just so expansive and delicious.
Thank you so much for having me, because this is a really exciting conversation on your newly branded podcast that is so exciting.
It feels unlimited for me. Yeah, unlimited and very expansive in the conversations that I want to bring to the table that are very much out of the noise, so people can start to ground into their own individual wisdom and see things through a different lens.
It's beautiful, and it's really important. I think that is the leading edge of conversation right now about where we're at and as individuals where we need to be focused.
So today we're going to talk about the patriarchal wound, which you and I talk about it quite a bit individually in our group space. But I'm sure there's many listeners that are like, what the hell are those two talking about?
Yes. And I think this is a great opportunity for this conversation right now in 2023, because the last few years, it feels like a bit of a washing machine, I think, for people, as the quickening of the awakening process has happened. Some people already in that space, like you and I, were like, whoa, bring this on. But it meant that there are many others, like millions of people. It was their first time having to look at the world around them and make some decisions, and really have to come into that conversation with self about, I'm not sure if this is really what is supposed to be going on. When we first realize that the system we live in and the people that potentially run it or make decisions within it are not the most conscious on the planet, those decisions are very outdated around dividing and conquering and trying to have control and power over other people. That is in its essence the patriarchal system at play. So our patriarchal system has been around for, over 5,000 years. And it wasn't always like this. No, you and I have spoken about that before. And it's really important to realize that wasn't around always. It was risen out of a drop in consciousness. And what that means is that we make decisions from a space that is about power and control over others. And specifically, it comes from what we call the wounded masculine, where we project externally to the world and energetically our energy systems get reversed. And so what we do as individuals is we get into this real scarcity mindset, fight or flight, power over, not taking responsibility, judgment, comparison, blame, justification. And we get conditioned that those behaviors are actually normal, or not normal is the wrong word, are the only way to behave. And so we make decisions and we communicate and we come into relationship with other people based on this deeply compromised version of who we are. And at the heart of patriarchal systems is that and why this came about was because there were some very unconscious men in society that decided that they didn't or could not trust the wise and the wisdom and the connection and collaboration that society had and the role that women played. Women played a really strong role. And of course, all aspects of what women are back then were represented. They were scholars, they were priests, they were astrologers, they were leaders, they ran governments in their form back then. But when you have people that come from a place of deep lack of trust because they don't have trust themselves and fear, what they rely on is anger and violence. And this is what gave rise to what we now know are the witch trials, that wanted to silence many women because those men did not understand what that meant, and decided this also coincides with organised religion coming into men being the only people who have a voice, and that everybody else has to go underneath them from a not just vibrational perspective, but from a consciousness decision-making perspective. And of course, I'm shorthanding all of history, of course, because this happened over 5,000 years. But the impact of that is that our society is created in this hierarchical structure. Best way for us to see that is how military and armies are set up. They're set up in a very hierarchical where people don't have decision-making power and you must obey those above you. Our society and organisations have replicated that in the name of safety. But what it does to create those environments is that individuals must forego their own power, must forego their own individuality, their own sovereignty, their own ideology, to fit into that society. And we see that in all institutions, organisations, workplaces. We see that in some marital institutions. We see that in friendship institutions. We see that in the way that we all operate. We have this idea that some people have greater equity in our society versus others. Generally, that's around money and power, or so-called power. That power only exists because we take resources and support of other people to gain it for ourselves. So patriarchy is a very narrow aspect of who we are as individuals and as a society. It wants us to say that men, and specifically when you narrow it down to its core, it's white men, white cisgendered men, who by fact are actually the smallest demographic on the planet.
Yeah.
However, they wield power over. And so what that means to us is that we internalize this from an internalized misogyny perspective, where we make decisions unconsciously that still want to keep them in power, only because we know when they're not, their response as a collective, and I'm not talking about individual people that you may know right now, as a collective is violence, war, domestic violence, withholding resources, financial resources, emotional resources to get people to do what they want, is something that we all feel, whether we've had the direct experience from the people that we love or not. We all feel that. We all know that there's a limit where how things can go before that part of society will bite back. And so what it means is patriarchy narrows down the experience of individuals. And in the last couple of years, there has been a crumbling of that part of our society, which is a good thing. But that's been happening for a long time. We're just seeing the quickening of that because we are being asked to step outside of that system and create something new.
When you speak all that, on the same page completely, I remember saying right now, the last 3 years, we are in the full effects of the power and control wheel.
Absolutely.
And I remember teaching that and learning that when I worked at Women's Refuge, and it was just complete the power and control wheel on all, if you do this, I'll give you that. And for me, that was a massive trigger. That was a massive trigger where I was like, how can no one else see this for what it really is? And I felt like I was being re-wounded again. I felt so wounded by the decisions that I had made and how the system, structures, people around me were okay about it and couldn't see it.
It's a really interesting thing. So we think about the impact that patriarchy on many levels, and we need to be really clear. Patriarchy is an oppressive system that oppresses everybody. So even when we look at it and go, well, that person must be successful and they must be because they've got money and they've got all these things, it's a very externalized system of thought. We must realize that there's somebody in their world who they're also scared of. The system perpetuates itself by it turns on itself all the time. And it uses division and separation of its communities to keep itself in power, keep people doubting. And when people are in doubt or confused, they don't decide things. That is how patriarchy has survived for many years. Of course, all of the force and the empires and the colonization, that is part of a patriarchal viewpoint. And there's somebody at the top of a tree that needs to be served and their needs are better or bigger or they need more than us. And that is the psychological part that we make our decisions through. The impact of that is that society and communities are developed in a really narrow mindset and a really tight, contracted ideology of what's possible. And what people like you who've been doing, what we say the work for a long time, where you've answered your call and niggles that you've got around, this is not quite right. And there's a part of you that we say has woken up. The work that you've been doing over all these years means that you're really equipped to understand how to navigate this. It doesn't mean it's easy.
No.
Because we see as it crumbles, we see the absolute guttural, disgusting lowness of humanity. And that's hard for us to deal with. Yeah. People are prepared to push other people under the bus to save themselves. Literally, people are okay with people's rights being taken away from them. We see, America is a really good observation for us right now because you look at the way their governments on their states are, wanting to take rights off women. Like it was done in the 70s. Like they're wanting to have control back over women's bodies. They're wanting to control people's voices. They want to minimize who has a voice. They want to minimize who can vote. Like these are things that were dealt with at the turn of the last century. And they're coming back because the system itself that is upheld by people who are not equipped to make decisions of greater capacity still hold decisions of power and places of power. And that is crumbling. We are finding more people. If you look at what happened in, I think it was Tennessee this week, there were 3 legislators that were kicked out of the legislature because they wanted to support the shooting and the victims of the shooting in Tennessee this week or last week. And they wanted to put forward that we need to ban guns. Now, the countries that you and I live in, we go, duh, of course, like that's what you would do. But the response of that legislator was to kick them out. Now, of course, the people have risen in that area and said, no, we don't think so. We don't think that is, well, A, you can't do it. And we're not going to stand for it. And of course, they've been put back. One of them's been put back in. So what we're seeing now is people going, we're not going to just look at the system and say, oh, well, we have to work around it, or we have to obey it, or we have to chip away at it, or there's nothing we can do. They're now saying, I don't think so, Charlie. Not on our watch. Like we're not standing for this. And we need to realize that the people that are making those decisions are not necessarily bad or evil. they don't have the capacity or the willingness or the capability to make different decisions. And that is what our patriarchal wound is about. We're upholding a system because we are conditioned to it, and therefore we keep cycling and replicating it. And then when we have to realize we need to up our capacity, which means we need to wake up and understand what that means.
And I think what you shared, that is so important, because we are reliving right now times that I just go, are we still having these conversations? Like, come on, people. Are we still having these conversations about women's rights and body autonomy and, just where do you start? There's so many of those conversations that I'm just like, hey, did we learn anything back there? Did we actually learn anything? Or, isn't that why we changed all these things and we're still relearning the lessons? And I think this is so important, because how do we expand and how do we grow to, instead of continually upholding the system as it's normal and everyone else, I think so many people feel it but are too scared to speak. Because what happens if I say it and someone's offended? Or what happens if I say it and I get it wrong? Or I misjudge the room? But I feel the reality is that that's how we grow. That's how we grow and change spaces. That's how we create from a sense of knowing and trusting ourselves rather than conforming and making ourselves small to fit in.
Yeah, it's
jam ourselves in.
Absolutely. We need to realize that we're in a time in the world, time in the history of the world or the history of the world where we have things happen instantly. Whereas I have a lot of thought about what was happening in my grandmother's era, because they were the women that marched the streets. They were the women that fought for rights. They were the women that allowed us to be where we are right now. And they had to do that grassroots in their local communities, with their local councils, with their local parishes, because they didn't have things like the internet. They didn't drive cars. A lot of them weren't able to vote. These are the women that we stand on the shoulders of right now, and men who also would have marched with them. Right now, though, we get everything instantly. The internet tells us what's happening in all corners of the world if we want to see it. And there's an overload of our neurology in our systems. We can't possibly take all of that in. I also believe that's part of the patriarchal rollback. We just inundate people with too much information. Again, they're not going to make a decision. And if we keep them distracted and fighting and thinking that their opinion is actually what is the strength of their being, then we're going to keep them distracted. So there are a number of things we need to sit back and go, I live in a world now where if I wanted to be, I could doom scroll all day and feel really helpless and hopeless. And that would buy into our patriarchal wound. A patriarchal wound wants us to feel helpless and hopeless. A patriarchal wound wants us to feel righteous and offended. A patriarchal wound wants us to feel like I'm in battle with my neighbor. A patriarchal wound wants me to think that there's actually nothing I can do here, and so therefore I just need to give up. And if anyone's listening, the feelings that they will give you in your body is heavy and sometimes heartbreaking. The truth is, the other side of a patriarchal wound is anything but that. Is where we get to discern the behavior of others and not have to buy into their conversation, because they're coming at it from a space of trying to uphold the system. That's where they're at. And until they're able to see something different, they're going to continue to support that. I believe our role now, if we want to step out of the system, is really quite clear, but we have to want to be on that road. We have to want to have that willingness to say, how else do we do this? Because this system sucks and it doesn't work for anyone. There's not one person on the planet this actually works for. You might say, oh, but what about those rich people? It still doesn't work for them, even though they might pretend and hide behind their resources. And maybe they will never get it, but the impact they're having on the world is crap. It's not good. And I'm not sitting here saying people shouldn't have money. I love money. I think people should all love money. I think we should understand money more. I think we should understand what resources are required within the world to support more people. Because me having 5 investment properties does not help anybody, not even myself, really. It doesn't. Sorry, I get a little bit off topic with that conversation, sister.
But I think this is the thing, you know, we're so conditioned to our patriarchal wounds that we actually, it's the thing it's holding us. And so how do we rise our consciousness or our knowing and trust ourselves to show up and create spaces that are really going to impact change? And I think that's really right now where we were being called to move to. I think that's
Absolutely.
You know, I know that for myself. This is why I'm showing up in this space right now, because I'm like, conversations I want to have aren't going to be on a radio show, really.
No, not mainstream. No,
not mainstream, because that's not where I'm really going to create divine change from. You know, the conversations around this education system, and obviously sex education that's happening at school, at my son's school at the moment. You know, I went, oh, here we go. We're going to have to fight the system again as a mother. It blew me away that I didn't have to do anything. They've consciously just said, actually, all you parents can come in and do the program yourself, and you can opt out what's not aligned with you. And I just went, that is awesome. We obviously have a really conscious principal that is listening to his community, listening to his people, and people aren't afraid to ask bigger questions and challenge the narrative and the consciousness. And so how do you see us rising above the wounded masculine, the wounded system, the wounded whatever we want to, you know, because I think this is happening individually, but it also needs to happen collectively.
Well, I think the first thing is we need to all realize that it must happen individually. The patriarchal system and our wound convinces us that we can rely on the system to take care of us. And so there is a lie.
It does that well, really.
Let's all just sit back and have a look at that from pick any era since the patriarchy has been in power. How has it served us?
Well, pick any system right now, whether it be hospital, education, whatever. It's like it's collapsing and crumbling, and there's so many dysfunctional realms to it.
Absolutely. And so part of the patriarchal wound is it tells us that we have to have all the answers, and we have to be the one, like the old guru model, that we have to know everything, and only then, and when we're perfect, can we actually have a voice. That is the way we stay oppressed, that we feel like we have to be isolated and separated from our neighbour, as in our physical neighbour, but also our spiritual neighbours. But we look at what is on the other side of patriarchy. We realise that this is about deep collaboration and connection, and not about committees and not about consensus, but about people being in a level of consciousness where we thrive in transparency. And so for us to thrive in transparency, as individuals, we must fight for our own transparency. We must do the work to understand what does a transparent version of us look and sound and feel like. What is the safety in transparency? Because the patriarchy has sold us that there is safety in being hidden. There is safety in agendas. There's safety in power over others. But what that means on an individual level is that we actually don't connect with who we really are. And this is not about connecting with you so that you can go, look at me, I'm amazing. It's more about, wow, I actually have more power in myself than I realize, not to build resources over people, but to create an environment that is resourceful for myself, money, love, abundance, trust, discernment, wisdom, joy. They're beautiful things that we don't aspire to in the patriarchal system because we're so distracted with survival. So the first thing we need to do is we want to fight for our own transparency, and we need to understand, what does it sound like and feel like when we're being transparent? And that means sometimes you have to have conversations with people that they're not going to feel comfortable with, not to call them out, but when you're in your full transparency, the impact of that is other people feel it because it's true and it's clean and it's clear. I'm not needing anything from you. I'm not trying to influence you. I'm not trying to take power off you. I'm actually just sitting in my trust and my truth. And my truth doesn't have to be in conflict with your truth. I'm just sitting there saying, well, I'm going to be transparent. But for me to be transparent, geez, I've got to let go of a lot of things. I've got to let go of the idea that I will be protected and saved by the system. I've got to have trust that in my grounding, in my physical body, in my embodiment, that is far more powerful, and yet it is on a consciousness level, than anyone who's sitting there trying to take my rights away from me. And building that trust and practice just in that one space of transparency shifts rooms, shifts conversations, shifts the way people want to connect, because we're now showing them a different model. And so to live outside the patriarchy is not about waiting for someone else to go, okay, I've worked it all out. Here's what we do. We rise at dawn. Here are the 10 steps. This is what we take down this and we take down that. It's not what this is about. This is about us individually being able to have greater capacity for love and joy and our own wisdom, capacity for ourselves without this, having to hold on to the railings of a system that tells us that we're going to be okay, or that we're woke, or that we belong. Because the system, that's what the system's bargaining with. If you don't sit here, you're not going to belong, and therefore you're going to be an outcast. And that's how patriarchal systems have survived. They have, told people they're never going to be good enough or worthy enough unless they sign with the powers that be. Well, the powers that be has always been you as an individual. It's always been me as an individual. And the more that we do that, connect with that space within us, do that work, build those capacities, dive into our willingness so we have the capability to withstand at the moment the crumbling, we change environments automatically. And we start to give rise to people and their knowing, and be able to hold that for everybody, physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
And I think, for me, when we talk about our patriarchal wound, it's allowing ourselves the space to disentangle ourselves energetically.
Absolutely.
From the noise, from the collective, and really deeply sit in your body, be embodied, and witness what's happening from this space.
Yes.
Then and trusting your body and your knowing, and listen to you, then you actually can dismantle and allow things. You can trust your process. You can trust yourself.
And so there's time involved in this. The beautiful thing about it is, when I think about when I started doing some personal development work and spiritual work, 20 years ago. Back then, there weren't a lot of resources, and there weren't a lot of people modeling around us what our bodies and our wisdom were telling us. And so it was very much a space of feeling alone. And this is how you and I found each other, like in spaces that were created by other women for us to explore what all this meant, because society does not reflect that back on us. The amazing news right now is because so many people, and I believe this is by design, I don't think this is any accident. I believe we're in the flow of absolute divine design, that we are now supposed to be doing all of this work. There's nothing to fight. It's actually get in the flow. There are millions of people around the world who are now wanting these conversations because they're internally going, this doesn't feel and look good, and this doesn't make sense to me anymore. And that's exactly what happened to you and I 20 years ago. This doesn't make sense to us anymore. Doesn't make us better. It just means that we were able to connect with it for whatever reason we were meant to those years ago, I believe, to help people now. Because we have done a lot of not just the internal work, but we've had to deal with the entanglement we've had within our relationships. Yep. And when we do it, we can untangle ourselves. We realize that the individual power and the power of the individuals coming together as a collective is so much more gracious and compassionate and empathic and wealthy and resourced and than anything the patriarchy has to offer us. Like, we're talking literal dark and light, not good and bad, not right and wrong, because we don't need to go there. That's an ego base. We're literally learning how to experience ourselves in a different frequency. And it's Our physical bodies know the way. Our physical bodies know the way.
Interesting that you've just said, like, when I look at, you know, I don't believe you have one awakening. I think you're consistently awakening.
Once you awaken, you're constantly.
Yeah, you're just like, oh my God, is there another layer today? Yep, there's another layer. But what I want to say is I think right now, many people are going to awaken in the messy middle. And the messy
that's where
of the crumbling.
Yeah.
And they're going to go, what the hell is happening around me? And see things that have always been there, but they're seeing it as it's crumbling. And this is the energy that I feel like we're starting to. And then how do you deal with that? Like, how do we actually support those people? Because the reality is, when you awaken, you can actually feel like you're going crazy.
Absolutely.
Like, I say to myself, fuck, it'd be so much easier to be asleep right now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And look, the thing is, people, you sometimes have the Instagram version of awakening. It's like the light comes on and everything's amazing and I see everything. Oh my God, I'm just like full power. And you go, no one wakes up in the light. You wake up in the shit. Like you wake up literally feeling like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah.
So if you are feeling that and it feels like this is heavy and hard and everything nothing makes sense, well, welcome to the awakening process.
Yeah. And I always say to people, if it was easy, that's why no one would want to do it. Like, if it was easy, we have to get into, you know, it's like we're an onion. There's many layers that needs to be peeled off. And I mean,
and also, sister, they're not just our layers. This is the thing. I was doing a class last night with my divine layers of change, is to realize that sometimes we get told, you know, you've got a wound and you've got an issue and you've got, and you. We need to realize that where do those things come from? Where do those reactions and responses of our body and our mind come from? They're not within us. They come from the system we live in. And so we need to have context for healing and awakening. It's not about you as the individual suddenly being, had the hand of God come down and touch you. This is about you coming back into your soul connection of who you actually really are. And that means that your relationship with the system must change, because vibrationally you are not in alignment anymore. You're at odds. That is where the distress and the chaos comes from, not within you being not enough or good enough or not having the resources. It's the conflict with the system you're having. That's it. And so you're waking up to this patriarchal system going, what the heck has been going on?
Yeah.
And we're now being asked to deal with that.
Yeah. And I think when I take that into context, just take that into context of some of the stuff that's happening here in New Zealand, you know, I remember, obviously for me, what's happened over the last 2 to 3 years, you know, I was like, this is the power and control wheel being played out. Like, this can no one ever see this. And I felt like I was talking Chinese when everyone else was like not seeing it. Then, you know, my next part was watching the 1 o'clock. I can say anything on this, can't I? With it.
You don't need to censor yourself here, sister.
God, sister. Watching, you know, the 1 o'clock, Jacinda Ardern marketing campaign, and, you know, the one source of truth, and really being angry that was just one narrative that was coming through our government lines of connection and everything. And then now, you know, watching TV and just that same level of anger, of awakening, like, why is there no other discussions or no other conversations or no other context? It's like, let's just if you're not into this, you're going to be labeled, you're going to be ostracized from society. I think right now, many people might not have seen that content of how the patriarchal system was, you know, really abusive towards its citizens.
Mm-hmm.
But now definitely can see the contents. When I see, you know, just the other day, mainstream media, 40% of New Zealanders now trust mainstream media. Well, that is because 60% of New Zealand have woken up to the fact that this isn't serving them anymore. So they're getting their information content from other sources.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting because if I think back to like my, when I was waking up, the personal development world was rife, coaching, personal development, Tony Robbins, blah, blah, blah. And at the time it was really helpful for me because it gave me context for what I was feeling. But it also was another form of patriarchal control because it was telling me the way I should think and what was wrong with me or what was happening for me. It gave me all of the answers. We need to remember that when we're waking up to our own wisdom. We're waking up and we all have different wisdom. We all have different aspects of truth. We all have different aspects of, I believe we've all been given parts of a puzzle that we're meant to wake up to and put them together. That's what I believe we're here to do. But we're all be doing it on different time frames. We're all doing that at different reasons. And the personal development industry, for everything that it positively did for people, was also trying to hold people in a space of patriarchal rule. We're now breaking out of that. That guru model is going away in all shapes and sizes. So the challenge for us is, while we're waking up now, we're also waking up in an environment where there's really not a lot of guardrails for us to hold on to. Because as those guru systems have also falling, while we should tap into other people's wisdom to give us guidance about understanding what's happening, we're really being asked to work out what this means for us. And this is the why I think so many people waking up at once is because we need that consciousness of vibration. And what that means is, when you're around people that are particularly negative, let's go there, you feel that in your energy system. So you might walk away feeling tired. You might yourself get negative. You might feel like, oh, that was just a really gross, conversation. We create the collective environment. Whether you're around 5 people or 2 people or 1 person or you just watch the news, that is your collective consciousness. With so many people waking up right now and shifting that consciousness, which means we don't want to be negative. We don't want to be judgmental. We need to understand how we experience ourselves differently. That means that what's possible for us as a collective shifts instantly. So when groups of people fight legislators because that legislator is going, what the heck is happening? That's never happened before. My word has always been the word. We're starting to have people that have more consciousness, have more power, not over people, but to create change. And that's what this is about. We need change in the planet right now. We need people with greater capacity to be those decision makers, the people that have greater willingness for change to be those decision makers.
And we actually need real leaders.
That's what a real leader is, can hold equity-based decision making at the core of what's happening around all parts, education, health, policing, politics, but also within our own relationships.
Yeah. And I think when you think of leaders, I don't think we've ever had a leader. I've had a leader that's led countries in just thinking of the Western world, leaders that have led countries into really deepen change that's going to serve humanity long term. I think there's a lot of gaslighting and a lot of let's make it look like this, but I don't think we've really had it.
I think if we look through history, those leaders that popped up were assassinated. And that's one of the challenges we have, right? People go, well, I don't want to put my head out there because unconsciously in our internalized patriarchal wound, we know that's not a safe thing to do.
And those
literally.
And those leaders here in New Zealand that have put their hands up to have different narratives or different conversations, and try and lead people in a different way and create communities differently, they are labelled disinformation, deplatformed, gaslit, on the front page of the paper. When I look at them and I think, wow, all they're wanting to do is hold people accountable and make people ask deeper questions.
And so that means that mainstream part, hasn't got the capacity to hold these level of conversations. And it's not because I think we need to really avoid thinking good, bad, right and wrong, because that's a patriarchal construct.
Yeah.
What we're trying to say is that people are ready for a bigger conversation.
Yeah.
And as individuals, we need to take responsibility of where those conversations are happening. And we need to seek those conversations out because we're in a space of growth, a rapid growth as a, planet, but as a community and in your own relationships. I mean, I know so many people in my friends groups, either their relationships are breaking down or they're getting closer together, but they're changing.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the theme and why we need to realize that we are the ones doing that. That your power within you, your wisdom, your connection to self, your exploration of who you are and your voice and your thoughts, it's more powerful as in it has more relevance than the patriarchal system itself. And so if you...
Your message right now, what you just...
It's such
a... putting it out there.
That's a little bit of a coaching moment that Lily just wanted to give me.
Yeah.
So when we remember that, and don't look, I am going through something right now where there is a reminder that we don't have to wait for somebody else to give us permission.
Mm-hmm.
It's not waiting for an accolade or external validation. And this is the challenge because we're not used to this. It's a very unfamiliar new environment for us all, but follow your instinct.
Mm-hmm.
Follow your instinct, which says that person does not have my best interest at heart or the best interest of the community. Not because they're a bad person. They just don't have the willingness. They haven't had any wake ups and they have no capacity to hold those conversations.
Mm.
To hold those conversations, we must come to the party to realize that every single person on this planet has the same equity as a living being on this planet.
Mm.
And that's a big conversation for people to hold because we're used to filtering decisions that make us feel better because someone else is less than us on all levels of that. That's a big conversation. But unless we want to prioritize equity in our decision making, we'll always be at the mercy of the patriarchal system.
Mm.
Always. And we will always be leading our decisions.
And that's huge.
It's a huge thing, but realize that what you're feeling right now is not the end point.
No.
Because one of the things that patriarchy tells us is, what's the end and make me work back? Give me what the end point is, make me work back. Going through, as you said before, multiple awakenings, because there's always this unfolding and there's always going to be this space of movement. And it is about movement. It is about grace. It is about opening up. It is about reconnecting. It is about rebirthing. All of those words that sometimes we don't even understand what they mean. But at the heart of it is about you as an individual wanting to build a relationship with you. And that's not a corner hallmark card.
No.
Trusting your instincts, trusting your wisdom, and understanding the context. Every time you do that, you're changing the context of who you are in this world.
Mm. And I know for myself, when I get the niggle of being uncomfortable, or I'm uncomfortable, or or something doesn't sit for me, right? It's something I need to feel into. It's something that I need to heal. It's something I need to feel into. It's something that's not aligned. It's something that, I deepen into really from being embodied in my body and trusting it. Sometimes it reveals things that I don't want to see, or I don't, my shadow stuff that I don't want to see and I don't want to work with. But I know normally I go away and ignore it for a bit and then come back and have to work on it. But it helps me expand and grow outside of the system so I can be more of me.
Yeah, because the system wants you to hold nothing. The system wants you to believe you've got nothing to hold because it will take care of everything. And so we don't learn this thing called capacity. Our nervous systems are fried. Our nervous systems are always on active. When we're outside of the system, our nervous systems are calm and nourished and connected. And the speed of them and what we're able to move through is actually speeds up, but not in a rushed neurological perspective, in a calm, deep and grounded perspective. And the more grounded you are, the more energy you actually have to give, but not to give away, but to nourish all the environments that you're in. And so one of the things that is deeply we come to awareness is how energetic we are as beings, and that your energy is the most consistent data point you can ever have on the planet. And that when you're given that call, that niggle, That's your energy saying, no, wrong way, go back. Or we just need to process this and move out what's no longer required. Our mind can't tell us that. Our opinion can't tell us that. Our ego can't tell us that. Our energy and the vibration of that energy is really the only reliable source we have on the planet, because it doesn't have an agenda, it has no ego, but it is so reliable. We just need to learn to hear it and trust it and work with it, not against it.
Love it. So, Maree, do you have any last gems of wisdom that you would love to share with the listeners?
It's worth it. If you're sitting there right now and you are in the space going, oh my God, the world looks like it's on fire and it's on chaos, it's because we've just shone more light on it, not because it's any worse than what it ever has been. It's always been there. You as the individual have just never seen it before. If you are seeing it, congratulations. If you are actually one of those people who can see and feel right now and say, oh, this is not what I signed up for, congratulations, because you've been asked. You've been asked to join the group. You've been asked to be part of history. You've been asked to be part of your lineage, your ancestry, to support the growth and expansion of the world that we live in. And it's not going to be easy, but it's not hard either. It is a willingness to explore, and there's far more safety in this space than not. And welcome, welcome, welcome.
Welcome to the party is what I want to say.
Welcome to the party.
Welcome to the party.
Bring your own party favors.
Yeah. Maree, I know that you have a phenomenal course and coaching program called Divine Leaders of Change. I've done it twice.
Mm-hmm.
For those that are listening that want to work with you in the next round of Divine Leaders of Change, do you want to just tell us a little bit about them? Because this is women that want to change spaces outside of the patriarchal system.
Yes, I mean, I started this program, thank you, Lily, a number of years ago in a different form. It was actually called Discern, because one of the things that I realized that we didn't have the capability of was how to actually discern people's behavior. And so from that program of a number of years, it is morphed, and there is a reimagined version which we've just opened up. The essence is actually exactly the same. How do we change our relationship with influence and power so that we can discern the energy of other people behaviorally? It's not what we think and what we say, it's what people do and how they behave is what we need to understand in environments so that we can lead change in every relationship that we have. In the essence, this is a relationship program system that we look at to go, how do I come into a relationship with others? Do I need to influence them? Am I giving away my power? How entangled am I? It's a beautifully fun, it's an activity, experiential program where people get to witness and walk with themselves in a really safe and brave space where you get to be held, and there's no judgment. This is about us exploring ourselves, which is what awakening is about, specifically about what would life be like if we lived outside our patriarchal system, and how do we hold that capacity? And people, I love watching what people do with this, because this is not about me saying this is how you do it. It's actually about me holding this environment to say, if you have a look over here in your relationship, and if you have a look over here, and we understand this part about how relationships come together, and you trusted and created transparency and discernment, what would that be instead? And I provide you energy tools and guidance and support to create this buoyancy for you to explore that yourself. I've watched people from this program change their relationship with their adult children, with their partners. They've changed businesses. They have opened businesses. They have absolutely understood their role within their families. And this is what we mean by change. It's not about us all becoming prime ministers. We change environments that we're in every single day, and we lead them differently by us bringing a different version and vibrational reality of ourselves. And so Divine Leaders is saying, when we understand and trust in the more expanded energetic version of ourselves, which is divine in nature, we get to lead environments really differently, and we get to lead ourselves differently.
I know for myself personally, the first time I did Divine Leaders of Change, obviously I was fully in Miss Lily's.
Yeah.
that was suffocating and draining, and I wasn't working to the best ability for really of what was serving me. That was a massive, massive light bulb moment for me and how I was showing up in my workspace with my staff. And also, you know, for me personally, that whole my choice around the vaccine, my husband's choice around the vaccine, and holding space, that was massive, a massive realization of holding space for each other, you know, and we couldn't have done, I wouldn't have probably had the capacity if I hadn't have done that, if I hadn't have done Divine Leaders of Change.
Thank you. And look, I love watching what people do with it and see them being able to go, oh, there are options. I don't need to fight or battle or armor up or compromise or pretend or ignore, which is what we're taught to do. I could actually do this differently. And the magical part is that other people follow. Is that other people, what it does, it allows other people, instead of them feeling like they're being influenced or they have to compromise or they're being powered over, is they get to feel what it's like to be around somebody who has that capacity, and part of them goes, well, this is pretty cool. And we automatically start to have different and higher level conversations because we've changed the environment for that to occur. The system itself has been altered within us.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that the conversations that I have with some people compared to conversations that I have with other people, though I don't know at the moment, they don't have the capacity to hear or see, is like two different timelines.
Absolutely.
Two different realities.
It literally is two different realities. And when we can understand the difference, we realize that, I don't actually spend any energy or power or anything in helping someone wake up or turn the light on. They would do that in their own time. My role is to practice and be in my space this way because there are people that are ready that I can connect with and collaborate with and be around, and my soul feels nourished and I get to experience myself on a deeper level, which is what we're all here to do.
Yeah, absolutely love. Maree, how do people connect with you, or how do people find out more about Divine Leaders of Change?
The easiest way is to come on Instagram, follow me on Instagram. So I'm at Maree Eddings, MareeEddings. And just DM me on Instagram. I like things to be easy and simple. And I think that's the way life should be.
Yeah, easy and simple. Love it. Thank you so much again, Maree. I know that the listeners will love this conversation because, you know, not only do they probably aware, some people will be aware that they're living in a patriarchal system, but not aware of the patriarchal wound. And it's navigating that.
Yeah, because as
navigating that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And at the end of the day, our patriarchal wound is ready to be healed. It's ready to be healed.
And I think we're ready to be released.
I think so too. Like, I think even though the world feels hard and heavy and chaotic right now, let's look at the other side. There are many people around the world doing some amazing things that are full of joy and love and wisdom and discernment and transparency and, you know,
connection.
It is actually a great time to be alive. That's what we came for.
Yeah, totally. Thank you, girl.
No, thank you so much.
So thank you for listening to our podcast. Please like and follow me to get updates on new podcasts coming out. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram under Priestess Lily. I look forward to connecting. And if you want to work with me, go to www.priestesslily.com.